Starting us off in at number 10, let's talk about the ancient computer. So that was the Antikythera Mechanism, which is also known as the ancient Greek analog computer, which means computers might have actually been around for thousands of years. In fact, experts believe that it came from a time between 100 and 205 BC. This computer was retrieved from the sea back in 1901, and it was found off a wreckage off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera, hence the name of this ancient computer. There have been several replicas of this device that demonstrate how it would operate. Apparently this device was able to calculate the motion of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter.
Coming in at number 9 now, we have Manfred Bajorat. In 2016, the mummified body of Manfred Bajorat was found by fishermen on a yacht floating off the Philippines. I just want to warn you guys, picture you're about to see is pretty graphic, so skip ahead now if you don't really want to see that sort of thing. Manfred was found like this, slumped at his desk in a mummified state. He had been sailing around the world on his yacht for about 20 years. It's thought from the way he was sitting that death was unexpected, perhaps from a heart attack. His mummified state may have been caused by the dry ocean winds, hot temperatures, and salty air. Alright, next up at number 8 now, we have the Gulf of Corryvreckan. This is a constant, massive whirlpool of death off the coast of Scotland. It's caused by a series of complex tidal forces and geology that combine to create this swirling pool of death. A documentary team once equipped a mannequin with a life jacket and a depth gauge. They threw it into the whirlpool where it was sucked down. They wondered if it would ever come back up again, but eventually it did. The depth gauge told them it had been all the way down to over 650 feet. So yeah, don't go near that thing. Ever. Alright, moving on to number 7 now, we have the Korean ghost ships. Every year, ghost ships with bodies show up on Japanese shores. When this first started happening a few years ago, everyone was confused as to exactly where they came from. Then it became clear they were coming from North Korea. At first, people thought the bodies were fishermen who were trying to escape North Korea, but when some ships were found with live crewmen, the men said they wanted to be taken back to North Korea. It turns out the ships are just old and keep being pulled out to sea with no GPS to get back. Okay, coming in at number 6 now, we have the Titanic. You guys may have heard of this ship before. The passenger liner sunk on its maiden voyage from the UK to the USA on April 15th, 1912, resulting in the deaths of over 1,500 people. For over 70 years, the location of the wreck was unknown, and then, in 1985, its remains were found on the seabed. Diving crews that have been there have returned with haunting pictures of this watery grave. It's drawn even more attention since the famous Titanic movie of 1997. Seeing these pictures are kind of disturbing for some people. It makes the whole thing feel a bit too real. Alright, next up at number 5 now, we have the Mariana Trench. This is the deepest point of the Earth's oceans. Its maximum known depth is 10,994 meters. That's over 36,000 feet. You'll notice that I said maximum known depth there. That's because scientists aren't even 100% sure how deep it really goes. Every decade the number seems to get revised. Experts were shocked to find creatures living in the trench. This was very surprising to them. They thought that life couldn't exist there because of the immense pressure. The fish and crustaceans that have been found in these mysterious depths look just as strange as you'd expect.
His name is James Cameron, the bravest pioneer. No budget too steep, no sea too deep. Who's that? It's him, James Cameron.
Alright guys, moving on to the number 4 spot now, we have the Great Blue Hole. This is a giant sinkhole off the coast of Belize in Central America. While the edges of the hole are relatively shallow, the hole itself plummets to a depth of 407 feet. The formation of it has taken place over the past 153,000 years. At one point, it was just an open air cave before being flooded by seawater. Divers are allowed to visit it if they have 24 hours of diving experience. However, many people are put off by the ominous feeling of the depths below them. Alright, next up at number 3 now, we have the Ice Finger of Death. The real name for this phenomenon is called brinicle. It's a downward growing hollow tube of ice of descending salt water that forms in extremely cold ocean temperatures. The icy finger will work its way down to the bottom of the shallow water, and when it gets there, it spreads out to freeze everything in its path. The BBC actually captured some incredible footage of it doing just this. Starfish and sea urchins were frozen solid when touched by the icy finger. Moving on to the number 2 2 spot now, we have the anglerfish. It's widely agreed that this fish is perhaps the scariest fish in the ocean. At first glance, the anglerfish already look scary. They live in complete darkness, about a mile underwater, in an area known as the midnight zone. They use a lure on their heads that's lit up by bioluminescent bacteria to attract other creatures. Its prey think they found a shiny fish in the ocean depths to eat, but when they get close, the anglerfish is there to greet them with a toothy mouth straight out of hell. And finally at number 1 now, we have Thonis-Heracleion. This is the lost underwater city that was discovered in the early 2000s off the coast of Egypt. Until then, historians had only heard about it in ancient texts. They presumed it had been lost forever, or perhaps didn't even exist. They found incredible Egyptian relics there, including this 5.4 meter tall statue of the god Hapi. In these murky depths among the fishes, archaeologists have found gold coins, stone monuments, and slabs with ancient text carved on them. They've been exploring the area ever since, but even today, it's thought that 95% of this city lost in time is still yet to be discovered.
At number 10, we have an octopus nursery. 8-legged alien looking things with suction cups all over their arms and beaks for mouths. Octopus are creepy looking things, and to top it all off, they can camouflage like a Navy SEAL, and they are super smart. If these are the kind of things that make your skin crawl, then just running into one of these guys would probably freak you out. Well, on the underwater expedition at the Davidson Seamount, there was a rather shocking discovery. They had a remote probe that was on the ocean floor around 10,000 feet, and they came across which seemed to be an octopus that was next to not just one, not just two, but a group of 1,000 octopuses in a nursery. They were all there laying their eggs and using the heat from the volcanic vent to keep them warm. I would hate to be the guy who accidentally steps into that crack and then gets devoured by thousands of sticky arms. But if you're at 10,000 feet underwater, you probably are already screwed.
Moving into number 9, we have a really old car that was pulled out of the water in Oklahoma. There was actually bodies pulled from the car as well, and this car was linked to a crime back in the 70s.
It's consistent with a car accident.
Back in 1971, 2 South Dakota girls were on their way back to an end of school party, and this party took place in a gravel pit. And this is when they went missing, and it wasn't until 2013 that this missing case was finally solved. Well, guess what? This story doesn't stop there. There's actually a second car, and there was another disappearance of a man in his 60s. I mean, this guy went missing without a trace. There was a body also found in a car. I mean, is this real life right now? What the heck is going on? How can 2 cars just disappear into a body of water and it's just deemed an accident? Maybe there is more going on with this case. I would have so many more questions. Something amazing is up next at number 8. Have you guys ever heard of an underwater river? Okay, good. Me neither. I don't know what the heck this is. Well, let's take a look. It's literally a river that flows underwater. Well, at least that's what it looks like. I think this is so trippy, and I'm not sure how it's even possible. Well, that was the Black Sea undersea river that was discovered in 2010. So the discovery of this river wasn't even that long ago. This river is the first of its kind in the world. The depiction of God found underwater is up next at number 7. Now this one is very interesting. The god Hapi, which is also known as the Nile god, is the god of the annual flooding of the Nile in the ancient Egyptian religion, but this figure was found underwater off the coast of Egypt, which just gives me more questions. This statue was found in the newly discovered ancient city Heracleion, also known by its Egyptian name Thonis. Divers were able to dive down to retrieve the 16-foot statue. Next up, number 6, we have the world's richest man on this list. And no, it's not because he was found at the bottom of the ocean. I don't think someone swam down there and that's how Jeff Bezos was born. He's a robot. That's him and water just don't mix. Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos, aka the world's richest man, spent money to recover the Apollo 11 F1 rocket engines. Well, he was able to recover the Apollo 11 mission rocket that was launched back in 1969.
I was sitting in my living room one day and I thought, you know, all of those Apollo F1 engines are sitting there. They're on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and theoretically you could recover them.
So yeah, that's exactly what he did, and he donated it to a museum. And at number 5, we have the Stonehenge in Lake Michigan.
I'm on a quest to investigate a mysterious pattern of rocks discovered under Lake Michigan that some are calling America's underwater Stonehenge.
The original Stonehenge is located about 90 miles west of central London in the country of Wiltshire. Archaeologists believe it was constructed from 3000 BC to 2000 BC, and no one knows how it got there or why it's even there. The Stonehenge in Lake Michigan has the same mysteries that surround it. It's believed that the Stonehenge has been underwater for at least 5,000 years. On one of the rocks there seems to be a carving of a mastodon.
Sketching it, once you outline the lines, looks like mastodon. Unbelievable. A mastodon carving on a rock that hasn't seen daylight in at least 5,000 years.
Mastodons are distantly related to the elephants about 10,000 to 11,000 years ago. Moving into number 4, we have trucks that were found at the bottom of the water about 42 meters down. There were about 120 large vehicles found, and this was due to a ship that sank back in 1980. The ferry that sank was actually quite large. Here's a picture of it. The name of the ship is Zenobia and is from Sweden, and it capsized in the Mediterranean Sea. It has now become one of the best diving sites in the world. Next up, number 3, I have to talk about the Titanic that is sitting currently at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. The boat sank back in 1912, which was 107 years ago. More than 1,500 people died from the disaster. The last surviving passenger on board of the Titanic actually passed away not too long ago, back in 2009. This was Eliza Gladys Dean, who was just 2 months old when she was on board the Titanic. I think that this is just incredible, and I have no idea how she even survived. She was the youngest passenger on board, but somehow was among the very few people that was able to survive. She lived until 97 years old, and for the Titanic, I wonder why they're not able to just pull it out of the water and have it featured in a museum. I mean, it's a pretty big part of history, but I'm sure it would cost a lot to retrieve it. Alright, number 2, we have this. Is this real life right now? How would something like this magically appear at the bottom of the ocean? Well, actually, this is confirmed to be man-made. Okay, I was freaking out there for a second. This is actually an underwater museum. This was created by an English sculptor, Jason de Taylor, and these statues have gained a ton of attention, and it's located at the bottom of the Caribbean Sea, not far from the island of Grenada. The first exhibits were placed there back in 2006. I don't know why, but I think it's very creepy. It's cool, but it still creeps me out. Finally, number 1, we have the Sunken Pyramid. This is the Yonaguni monument, also known as the Yonaguni submarine topography, which is located in Japan. This underwater pyramid was discovered back in 1986 when divers went there looking for hammerhead sharks. This area was known for large populations of hammerhead sharks. There's a ton of speculations that surround this underwater findings. People believe that it could be a lost city, a lost civilization perhaps. Maybe this was man-built thousands of years ago, and it can possibly also be naturally made.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have Chuuk Lagoon. This is the world's biggest ship graveyard. It's a site of a World War II battle between the US and Japan. At the bottom of the lagoon now lies 60 warships and 200 aircraft, frozen in time beneath the waves. Divers have found many skeletons of the dead soldiers, sailors and airmen who died in that battle. These days though, Chuuk Lagoon is a popular area for tourists, with only some of them aware of what lies lurking in the nearby waters.
At number 9, we have the Siberian lake monster. Of course, if we're doing a list of scary things that live underwater, we have to throw a giant mysterious sea monster on here. What separates the Siberian lake monster from other more popular guys that we have seen like Loch Ness and that kind of stuff is that underwater scans have actually picked this guy up. This thing is deep in Lake Labincure, and some radar has shown that it looks like a 33-foot long creature is living there. Now this is probably just a skeleton, but if this thing is dead, it means that there was once a giant man-eating monster in in this lake. I thought we were supposed to be safe in freshwater. They've nicknamed this thing the devil, so you know he's a good time and loves company. So next time you go up to the cottage and you're swimming in the water and you feel safe, remember there might be a giant monster lurking underneath the water ready to turn you into a side dish. At number 8 we have the blue hole. Now there are several blue holes in the world. There's one in Belize, there's one in the Red Sea, there's a giant one in my heart that was left there from when Reboot ended on a cliffhanger. How are you going to end a show that so many people fell in love with on a cliffhanger? I will never trust again. Well, this one is between Cape Verde and the Caribbean islands. Scientists are really confused about this thing. It's a crack in the bottom of the ocean floor and is several thousand miles long. What's strange about this is there's no explanation of how this happened. It might have been tectonic plates moving around, but when this happened the Earth will probably start to repair itself and there's been no sign of this. My theory is this is where Godzilla goes to sleep at night. I mean, it seems like the most logical answer. It's either that or the gateway to hell. Like, come on guys, I'm doing real science work here. At number 7 we have the YONAGUNI complex. This was discovered by scuba divers in the 1980s. I think that's the scariest part about this one. Could you imagine going scuba diving back in the 80s? The technology back then must have been a tube going up to some guy who would blast fresh air down to you using a bicycle pump. I don't even think they had decompression sickness figured out back then. The chances of you coming up the bends was probably super high. Well, if it wasn't for a few divers in Japan who were willing to sacrifice it all to look at some cool stuff, we wouldn't know anything about the YONAGUNI complex. It's still a mystery as to what this thing is. It looks like some temples that might have existed thousands of years ago, but when the ice age decided to melt, it would have covered this entire area. This could be why an entire civilization got plunged underwater. Or the temple could have been on a cliff, and then when a massive earthquake hit, it knocked the temple into the water. But like everything in life, there are some haters who say this whole thing is just a natural rock formation. Some people just want to ruin everything. At number 6 we have ANCORA, SISTA, TWISTA. One of the reasons why the underwater world is such a mystery is because we find things like this in there. Sure, there are beautiful things down there like bright fish and chubby marine mammals, but there's also the unknown, unidentified organisms like ANCORA, SISTA, TWISTA, which should be the name of an 80s hair metal band. But what is this thing? Well, it's a protist. And what is a protist, you may ask? Well, it's an organism that doesn't belong to any animal group, fungus, or plant group. What does that mean? I really have no idea, you guys. I think it means it could be an alien. Some alien came down to Earth for a swim and then scraped its knee on some coral, and now we have alien creatures running around the ocean, probably waiting for you to pee so it can swim up your pee hole and then work its way into your brain. It's really the only logical answer. At number 5 we have the BIMINI Road. How were the pyramids made? Was it aliens coming down to share their technology and secrets with us, or was it just thousands upon thousands of slaves who sacrificed their lives and their spines to build them? Well, we don't know and we may never know, but the BIMINI Road is another one of these mysteries. It's off the coast of the Bahamas, and it looks like it could have been a pathway that was placed perfectly with giant slabs of rock. Similar to the way the pyramids were made, it seems that these large slabs of rock were too large to be moved by man, and also like the pyramids, these giant slabs were also perfectly placed so well. So where does everyone's mind go when something like this happens? Well, magic or aliens. The logical answer is that this is a natural phenomenon of the water moving and hitting the rocks to make these formations, but people think that this was made using advanced technology from aliens and could have been the road to Atlantis. Honestly, I like the Atlantis theory much better. It's more fun. At number 4 we have colossal squid. Yeah, this thing is a big no thanks for me. So everyone always talks about how there might be sea monsters out there, but this thing actually exists. There's never been one caught alive, but several have washed onto shores dead, and they are massive. The largest one ever discovered was 45 feet long and it was dead. So you know there was an even bigger one out there that killed this guy. They don't even have suckers on their tentacles, they have hooks. Let me say that again. This squid has 10 giant arms covered in hooks. This thing is straight out of a horror movie. Scientists aren't even sure what something this big eats. They think it probably feeds on whales or your deepest darkest fears. I wouldn't be surprised if the colossal squid works part-time as a gatekeeper for hell. It makes me think that the old Greek stories about the Kraken might have been real. At number 3 we have underwater circles. Giant formations of circles that are formed underwater and nobody knows how they got there. These mysteries were discovered off the coast of North Carolina, Florida, and Belize. Now what are they? Like many things on this list, myself and the entire scientific community have no idea. But here are some theories. Maybe they were formed naturally by either two things, water currents or some sort of animal mating ritual. Another idea is that these things were made by ancient civilizations before the Ice Age. All these things would have been above ground and might have been art left over by some old-timey tribes. And the third theory is that they look kind of like a bullseye, so it might be some sort of nuclear missile target, and if you hit it hard enough, the explosion will cause some sort of major natural disaster like an earthquake or tsunami, or if we're lucky, both. At number 2 we have Megalodon. If you have a fear of sharks, you're gonna love this one. Megalodon was a prehistoric shark that was even bigger than the giant hook tentacle beast that was earlier on this list. If you've already forgotten about the colossal squid, it clocked in at around 45 feet long, where Megalodon was closer to 60 feet long. It was a 60-foot shark that could probably rip a blue whale in half in one bite. Well, maybe not that, but it was still a gargantuan creature with teeth the size of Brock Lesnar's fists. This thing wouldn't even chew you, it would just swallow you whole and then fart your skeleton out into the dark cold ocean. At number 1 on our list, we have Giant Eyeball. A mysterious giant eyeball washed onto the shore of a Florida beach back in October of 2012. I don't know any other kind of giant eyeball other than a mysterious one. There's no super common regular giant eyeball just lying around. But this is also Florida. This is the state where people smoke crack at weddings and kiss alligators on the lips, so maybe it's a little more common over there. Well, this giant eyeball was found by Gino Cavalcante, and he didn't know what the hell to make of it, so he took it home and then stuck it in his freezer. Then he called the cops, and the cops came in and told him, "We don't do giant eyeballs on the beach. You have to call the wildlife people." And then he called the wildlife people, and they were like, "What the hell is that?" And he was like, "I don't know, I brought it to you guys to try and figure out what it is." And then some people were like, "Maybe it's a sea monster," and other people were like, "No, it's probably from a marlin." And I think in the end, no one really knew what the hell it was. But just so you know, there's giant eyeballs out there just laying around the beach sometime.